And welcome to Inside Albania with me, Alice Taylor. Today I'm joined in the studio by Kosovo's former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Meliza Haradinaj. Hello, welcome to Inside Albania.
Thank you for having me, Alice.
You've been a guest on the show before, but I wanted to talk about a number of issues with you today, and it's better to do this in person.
Definitely, yes.
So, it's been quite a year in terms of what's been happening in Kosovo, with the EU, with the US, with Serbia, relations with Albania. It's probably been the most challenging year in terms of being a journalist trying to report on the situation. What I want to start talking about this week is we had a NATO meeting of foreign ministers this week, and we had NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg expressing his concern about escalating tensions in the Western Balkan regions. He talked about how NATO is going to do its best to maintain stability. There might be more troops sent. He mentioned increased tensions and a provocative rhetoric in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Serious incidents of violence in Kosovo, including the attack on NATO peacekeepers, and of course the terrorist attack in September. We also had the German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock saying that external actors are constantly trying to destabilize the region and that peace often hangs by a thread. She also mentioned Kosovo, in particular the border with Serbia, and in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Meanwhile, the EU's chief diplomat Joseph Borrell said the EU and NATO would continue to ensure stability and peace and security in the region, particularly in Kosovo and in the border with Serbia. Now, we have three very powerful, very high-profile diplomats here, all making it very clear there are big security risks in the Western Balkans. Now, it's very clear to me, and I think to you as well, even though they didn't say it, the common denominator here is Belgrade. Definitely. Belgrade is behind all of these issues that they mentioned. Now, why are they not calling a spade and saying Serbia is behind all of this? And what action are they taking aside from these words?
Unfortunately, Alice, that is totally true. We've seen the West being very tolerant on Serbia's growing destructiveness in the region, not only specifically with Kosovo, but we've seen it in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we've seen it with Montenegro, we've seen issues as well as Russian influence via Serbia as a proxy in Macedonia as well. Mm-hmm. So it's the whole region, and it's the Serbia who has to be designated as the one who does these belligerent acts in the Western Balkans region. So unfortunately, after the full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine, contrary to popular belief that we thought that the West will tie its loose ends in fragile regions of the Western Balkans, we've seen the total opposite. We've seen actually the Western Balkans gradually backsliding into a very dangerous cycle of certain elements, and those are a faded international attention, also lowering diplomatic goals and ambitions, specifically with Kosovo. We know that before the Russian invasion in Ukraine, all that was discussed about was the mutual diplomatic recognition between Kosovo and Serbia. However, after the invasion, we only hear lowering goals like de facto recognition or other terms or other designations of a solution, of an intermediate solution, not a final one. So this immediately backslides the region, and specifically Kosovo-Serbia issue, to a lower level of attention, and as well encourages Serbia to move stronger and more intensively, as it did in September 24th, with its, as I said, belligerent acts, violent acts, inciting dangerous violence in the fragile region of a border between Kosovo and Serbia, training and executing dangerous paramilitary attacks, crimes of aggression, as it did in Banska in September 24th. And we also see the West being totally silent about it. It's been almost 2 months, and we haven't seen a clear designation of what the September 24th crime of aggression was. We've just seen some of the states bilaterally unilaterally mentioning that it was a terrorist attack, but they didn't say it was orchestrated, organized, and executed by the Serbian state apparatus, by their political, military, and intelligence service.
And in fact,
And this is what the region needs, actually, because
Yes.
Serbia needs to be isolated if it does all of these destructive acts
Yes.
against its neighboring countries.
I mean, some might say, and you mentioned that the EU is sort of watering down its ambitions. Do you not think that maybe this is they're aware because of the war in Ukraine, Russia may be feeling more empowered to interfere in the Balkans more? Maybe they feel they don't have the power to push for these more strong sort of solutions, as you said. Maybe they think, okay, maybe if we can push for multiple smaller solutions in the current context, that would be better than pushing for final recognition.
Actually, we know the structural problems that exist in the EU because of the 5 EU non-recognizers, so they don't have a common denominator in terms of its stance with Kosovo. So they can't say that Kosovo is a state, they can't say that Kosovo should be recognized, and consequently, they can't say that the final epilogue of the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia should be mutual diplomatic recognition. So that's why we've vocally and continuously said that the US should step in and the US should take over the leadership role in the dialogue with Serbia, because it's only then that we will have not a neutral stakeholder, but someone who is actually a stakeholder, who has invested a lot in the present day region, in peace, stability, in democracy as well. So there's plenty to be done as well, but we need an opening. We need a final solution to lead the region towards conclusive peace, because we haven't seen that. And September 24th, I repeat, it was a failure of diplomacy because war started. The region was in the brink of a war.
Yes.
It was a very dangerous event.
And that danger hasn't subsided.
And it hasn't, definitely hasn't. We've seen also increased acts of hybrid warfare of Serbia as a Russian proxy in the region. So before, they just retaliated with barricades, not with violence and with armed weapons. But after, especially in the last few months, they've increased and they've radicalized their retaliation, if I may, or their violent acts, criminal acts with arms.
Of course.
And with Russian signs in the
If you
north
attack
of Kosovo.
NATO peacekeepers and there are no consequences to that, and in fact, Kosovo gets sanctioned, sorry, they're not technically sanctions, measures, that is obviously going to empower further actions of a similar vein, isn't it?
Empower and encourage. And it hasn't been only the last terrorist attack, the paramilitary attack they did in Banska. We've also seen Serbia continuously being armed with Russian and Chinese NATO-incompatible attack systems, not defense systems, attack systems, while being surrounded with NATO members and with KFOR in Kosovo, with a NATO-led peacekeeping mission in Kosovo. So who are they going to attack with those attack systems? Panzers, Kornets, all well-known attack systems from Russia and China. So we haven't seen any sanction on Serbia being pressed from the West. We've also seen Serbia continuing with its impunity policy as a state policy, not giving up their war criminals, sheltering them, glorifying them, also glorifying Putin after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So also his close ties to the Serbian mercenaries fighting in Donbass and now in Ukraine as well, they are closely linked to Vučić directly. So we haven't seen, it has been a total silence from the West. We've also heard a few days ago the Russian MFA spokesperson Zakharova saying that the West is encouraging Albanians on an aggressive Serbophobia, and the West is acting upon this allegation, against this allegation, to try to prove Russia that they are not doing this, that they are actually working, appeasing Serbia, working with Serbia. And we've also heard Secretary General Stoltenberg last week saying, while he visited Belgrade, saying that they are working towards strengthening NATO's relationship with Serbia, that was really shocking.
Yes, I was.
Specifically for us in Kosovo, because specifically after the September 24th attack, when all facts pointed towards Serbia as the orchestrator, organizer, and executor of this crime of aggression, and still having NATO Secretary General saying that
We
statement,
want to be friends.
it was very, very
Yes,
shocking
of
for
course.
us. And instead of, calming down the situation and giving an opening and a perspective for the Western Balkans, a NATO perspective, we've seen with these statements, it has done the contrary, the opposite.
But do you think this is saber rattling on the part of Serbia, or do you think they really have the guts to take things a step further? Could there be an actual war? Do you think it's really possible?
Listen, before Banska, before the September 24th attack, when a large-scale armament entered Kosovo, also vehicles, armored vehicles, and a lot more than 30, as reported in the media, paramilitaries, trained paramilitaries, uniformed, entered Kosovo, while the border between Kosovo and Serbia is being overseen from KFOR troops. When we've seen all that happening while KFOR was there, we still have to give it a second thought.
Yeah.
Before, we were still, this is very
think, oh, NATO are there, they
appeasing
wouldn't
when we
dare.
know that NATO is there, and we know NATO is the greatest military alliance in the human history, and it is calming. We know that NATO is there, and whoever enters into or aims to enter into a full-scale war, it will face NATO. But Banska has proved the opposite, unfortunately.
Yes.
Now I'm not in an institutional position, and I'm more flexible to say this. But this was very alarming.
Yes.
It's positive to see that the KFOR has increased its troops, specifically the British, throughout the border with Serbia, and they're overseeing it more intensively. But not punishing Serbia for what they did, not holding Serbia accountable, not just in dialogue, because in dialogue as well, it's not being held accountable at all, but not being held accountable in larger geopolitical contexts as well, will only encourage Serbia to continue with the same, and not just with Kosovo, but also with the other neighboring countries it has continuously done. So
And-
this is counterproductive what's happening, and I hope that maybe behind closed doors there are other discussions going on. But unfortunately, we're seeing that the West is waiting for Vucic's elections in December 17th, maybe after the elections, to come out with a statement on the investigations and with the facts that that Kosovo continuously presented on what happened on September 24th and who was behind.
I actually pressed this point. I was thinking the other day, I haven't heard anyone talking about the terrorist attack in the north of Kosovo for a while. It all seems to have gone rather quiet because, after it happened, there was a lot of talk about it, and the EU made lots of statements, and it demanded this and that. And in an interview with Viola von Krammen, she told me that the EU had prepared a package of measures against Serbia, and this was great. Yet 3 months, almost 3 months, have passed since the attack took place, and nothing is being mentioned. Now, I contacted Peter Stano, the spokesperson, and I said, is the Commission still ready to consider measures against Serbia? He said, yes, the position of the EU has not changed. The possibility of measures is still there if member states see that Serbia has not delivered on de-escalation and has not cooperated on the clarification of the attack in Banska. I asked as well, does the Commission have any more clarity on what happened? It's been 3 months. He said the EU does not investigate the attack, it's the Kosovo authorities. But he says, we have received information on the attack from partners, including Kosovo. I said, well, has Serbia given full and unconditional cooperation? He said, this is for the investigator. The EU is not the investigator. And I was thinking, well, how can you say you want cooperation, but then at the same time you don't have a clue whether they're cooperating or not? Anyway, I said, what stage is the investigation at, to your knowledge, and when can we expect a result? It's not the EU investigates, it's the Kosovo authorities. So I pressed him a bit further. And I said, I know it's not you investigating it, but I would expect you to sort of have an idea what's going on.
As they usually do have an idea
Well,
about
yes,
everything.
you seem to have an opinion on everything else. He said, it's not us who'll be commenting on the issue while there's no formal final report. The timelines are in their hands. We've made our expectations regarding Serbia's cooperation clear, and we're following the issue closely, but we will not comment on it on this stage. The issue of potential EU measures against Serbia are reviewed regularly by member states in the relevant working formations of the Council, and so far no decision was taken. Now, you said just now you think they're going to wait for the outcome of the elections, which are taking place in Serbia on the 17th of December. I almost feel like maybe it was a strategic decision from Vučić to call elections sort of around this time, because he knows that any decision on measures would be the end of him, basically, politically.
I don't know if it will be the end of him. The EU sentiment in Serbia is very low.
Yes.
And also Vučić is not only practically but publicly as well working openly with Russia and China.
Yes.
So it's not that they're fully aligned with the EU perspective and with the EU values and with the EU integration agenda as well. We've seen Vučić use these strategies to buy time to avoid a potential agreement with Kosovo. He does this with the previous government. He did this with the previous government. So within 3 years, we have 6 months in the previous elections when Vučić went through. It took him 6 months to form the government. Now I believe we will have another 6 months. So up until April next year, maybe when he will have an official government as well, formation. So he's using this strategy to buy time, to avoid an agreement as well. So next year we'll also see the US go into an electoral cycle. So it will be more and more
elections
as well, the EU. So it will be more and more difficult and more complex for a prospective end to the dialogue, unfortunately. And it's always the region that
suffers.
Suffers and copes with
now,
the consequences.
It seems the EU is trying to... It doesn't want to comment on this situation anymore. It's old news, for whatever reasons, as we've just discussed. But my questions are, to your knowledge, how far is the investigation? What stage is the investigation at? The EU mentioned, Stano mentioned a final report. How long can we expect this? Do you have any information on this?
Actually, I don't have an official information. I'm out of institutions and out of political parties right now. But what I've seen, and with contacts with people and diplomats as well, I know that there is a final investigation report, and it has been delivered. Unfortunately, they're comparing notes with their investigations on the ground, because, they were present. International structures security structures were present in the north, and they are comparing their reports with the Kosovo authorities' report. But I do strongly believe, that they are waiting the timeline of Serbian elections, not to endanger the dialogue as well, and also to, unfortunately and paradoxically or ironically, however we want to call it, help Vučić get over with these elections and wait for his false promises, as always, to deliver after the elections. But I think there will be misled as well, and they will be disappointed as always, because Vučić will continue with the same line of strategy and
also
orientation.
Every day that is wasted in dealing with the outcome of this report, possible measures, dealing with the situation, every day is another day that Kosovo is at risk, that security, that safety in the region is at risk. It's bizarre that they seem to think that is not as important as keeping Serbia happy.
It is at risk. If we take a look at the larger perspective of the region, at the bigger picture, we can see only Kosovo and Bosnia and Herzegovina as two islands left out from the NATO Adriatic belt, from the NATO map. And Bosnia and Kosovo are the ones who are fighting the West's influence, with Russia being Serbia as their proxy. So I think there's a large opportunity now for NATO to have a renewed enlargement perspective in the Western Balkans, and not just wait or complain or try take measures to avoid a new conflict that Russia is trying to spark in the Western Balkans, but actually being more proactive and work on a renewed perspective for both countries. So it might not mean immediate membership in the alliance, but it may mean increased cooperation, partnership for peace for Kosovo. Kosovo is the only one who is not a member of Partnership for Peace,
Yes.
while Serbia, ironically, still is part of Partnership for Peace. Or maybe a membership action plan trying to join NATO programs, which are dedicated to specific topics like public diplomacy, disaster relief, these kinds of programs that they might increase cooperation between Kosovo and NATO. But I know they've been avoiding this for such a long time because of course, the same old story of the four NATO non-recognizers, and because of them, they can't really get into a political dialogue with Kosovo right now.
And it's a shame because...
But unfortunately, also Kosovo is not doing the job right now from their political dialogue because they have to increase on a bilateral level cooperation on a military aspect as well with the NATO members as well. And unfortunately, Albania as well as a NATO country, NATO member, is not helping this agenda whatsoever.
But it goes back to what I was saying earlier. You know, the two countries most at risk in the region are not being brought into the fold, be it NATO or the EU in any way. In fact, we've seen Bosnia and Herzegovina are being leapfrogged by Ukraine and Moldova. They're going to have another slap in the face in December when accession negotiations are probably going to open, you know, and yet these are the countries which need it. I'm not going to say more than Ukraine, which needs it as well, but if you're serious about risks in the region, you have to give something to these countries, more than is being given just now, the same platitudes, the same, you know, you'll get there eventually. I don't understand why they're being sort of left out in the cold when people are very aware that they are the most at risk and who need to be part of these institutions for their own safety and that of the region. And I want to talk about NATO and EU membership. So at the same NATO ministerial, Stoltenberg said that NATO will do what is necessary to ensure stability in the region, as this is important for the whole of Europe. Baerbock added that the EU accession of Western Balkan countries is very important, as it represents vital security. Yet, as I said, we have the two countries which, by these diplomats' admission, are not even 1 foot on the ladder of accession, which is just crazy. So Kosovo applied in December 2022 for EU membership. Do you know, I mean, I've heard very little about it since sort of the beginning of last year. Do you know anything? Where are we? What's happening with this?
No, I don't think there's been any progress towards it. Kosovo has been focused on the Council of Europe membership, and I think that has been a promise that was made within the dialogue context as well, that the West will help Kosovo get into the Council of Europe if it works on the implementation of the basic agreement reached in Brussels and annexed in the Ohrid as well. So I haven't seen any dynamic towards this agenda. Unfortunately, it has been left in the dark, and also the European leaders haven't provided any perspective or haven't used this leverage as a transformational tool for both Kosovo and Serbia. Now, Serbia is using this dialogue, the open-ended dialogue, undefined dialogue with Kosovo, to leverage or to maximize its integration perspective with minimal effort. So they do a little concession in dialogue and they make a giant step in opening accession chapters.
But then Vucic goes home to Belgrade and
Definitely,
says the opposite.
Yes. However, in Kosovo, the European perspective has been reduced only to the visa liberalization, which was a saga, unstoppable,
yes.
you know, it never ended saga. So let's hope that we will have in January this implemented, and the people of Kosovo, especially the youth and students, will have this opportunity to travel and come back and go study and see and do
Despite what
business.
Macron said.
Despite what Macron said, yeah, definitely. But unfortunately, we haven't seen a clear perspective on what the European leverage should be. Unfortunately, this has given ground to Serbia to ask to get something from Kosovo in order to sign an agreement. However, it should the EU should give something, a
Of
leverage
course.
to both countries
All
so
I
that they
see-
don't get into trying to minimize each other's sovereignty, minimize each other's territorial integrity, and so on and so forth. So they should look towards the EU, but the EU should provide that perspective.
Of course. All I
Unfortunately,
see
we haven't
is
seen
the
that.
EU moving the goalposts when it comes to Kosovo. So first it was don't hold elections, then it's don't put your mayors there, don't phase out the license plates. Then it was need to hold new elections. Now it's you have to hold Serbian elections in Kosovo, even though there's been no formal request made, etc. And all I see is, okay, do I think Kosovo could have handled certain things in the last year slightly differently? Perhaps that's a separate discussion. But all I see from the EU is a constant list of evolving demands of concessions related to sovereignty that they expect
Definitely.
Kosovo to make, with zero in return. The
Definitely.
prize is still the same. It's not got any bigger. There's no carrot of EU
No, it has
membership.
been lowered.
Yes.
It has been lowered because there was mutual recognition. Now it's de facto recognition,
Yes.
which is somehow like a void, not a practical term or not a practical benefit that the state might see or the citizen might feel. So
lip
it doesn't
service.
advance Kosovo's international subjectivity. It doesn't provide anything for the state of Kosovo. So if we compare the demands, it's totally asymmetrical, and it has been like this for the past 5 years, I might say. Kosovo is constantly being asked to withhold its, for example, its genocide claim against Serbia because of an active dialogue, and we did that. However, we've seen Banska not affecting at all Serbia's position in the dialogue, while Kosovo constantly makes concessions, and while Kosovo is under measures in difference to what the Serbian position is.
And we have-
And not just that, we are being asked to provide an extended like model of rights of communities in Serbia, in Kosovo, Serbian communities in Kosovo, which Serbia does not provide for the Albanian community in their country.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Then we are being asked to continue cooperation with the specialist chambers, while Serbia has become a haven for its war criminals, a shelter for its war criminals, and actually has impunity as their state policy and continues to be unnoticed, unsanctioned, unchallenged by the West. And so on and so forth, while we see Serbia not being pressured at all about anything.
No,
Not even
the pressure for
recognition.
You Albanians in the southern municipalities of Serbia cannot raise an Albanian flag. They cannot hang one outside their window. They cannot access healthcare in their native language. They cannot even access healthcare because they've been struck illegally off the civil register and are essentially stateless
Definitely.
without an ID card. Then you have Kosovo, which has the strongest framework, legal framework for minorities in
minority
the
protection.
entire European
Definitely.
continent. And yet Kosovo is being held hostage because it needs to do more. And then you have MEPs and people in Brussels saying, oh, well, it's too late to include the Preševo Valley in the dialogue process. Says
come
who?
on.
You keep adding things to Kosovo's
They
to-do
added the
list.
Orthodox Church, which was never part of a dialogue, Brussels dialogue. They managed to add it. So how come the
Why can't-
Albanians in Serbia? But now we have to have Albania stepping in, because Albania has a constitutional obligation to take care for the
Albanians
Albanians
outside.
outside its
Yes.
borders. So Albania is hesitant to step into this issue, unfortunately, and
it-
help balance it out somehow.
It's a
Because
whole
if-
new can of worms.
I know,
It's,
I know.
But it's double-sided. It's hypocrisy. It's
It is definitely. It's very disappointing to
Yes.
see. But let's hope that the Albanians themselves in Serbia will step in,
This
and
is-
they will be more vocal. And of course, Kosovo will continue to support them. We did in the past. I can see the current government as well is financially supporting them, opening ways for them to go and talk to the American Congress, White House, and so on and so forth,
I
State
spoke
Department.
with Flora Ferrati, who did that huge piece of research on it, and she said, they do have some forms of legal recourse, and the Albanians living there do need to take some action themselves
course.
and push it forward as well, and then maybe it will be more prominent on the agenda.
Unfortunately, yeah. But Kosovo right now is very limited to how
Yes.
we can help them.
Yes, I'm
we
saying
can
in
coordinate,
Preševa,
but
they have to
yeah.
do it themselves as well.
But this is a work that Albania has to do, and
Yes.
let's hope that they will in the next few months or years.
Now, looking back over what has happened the last year, as I mentioned earlier, I've had many sleepless nights, writing about what's happening. I'd start writing an article, and by the time I finished it, it's changed, and I have to go back to the beginning again. The stalling of talks, conflict in the north, injured NATO troops, kidnapped police, spats with Brussels, a terrorist attack. Also, as well, relations with the EU and the US potentially reaching not the lowest levels, but not great levels. Do you think the Prime Minister could have handled something slightly better?
Of course, listen, he has the greatest political legitimacy in the modern political history of Kosovo. So he can use this power to reach out to the opposition and to benefit maybe from their experience, because this is the first time that Kurti is in the government, so in the executive branch. So what he did, especially with coordinating with the international community, he thought that coordination minimizes sovereignty, which is not true. Whatever Kosovo achieved in strengthening the state, consolidating the state, advancing its international subjectivity, it has done so by close coordination with our allies, with the US, with the Quint, with our traditional partners, who are the main stakeholders of the present-day Kosovo. So this is what I think Kurti has done wrong in the beginning, when this issue with the license plate started. If he would have given up and just trusted the US proposal in the beginning, we would not deal with the issues that spiraled afterwards, with violence, with barricades. And afterwards, he gave up and extended the validity of the license plates while negotiating with the criminals, Vucic's criminals, who put up those violent barricades. So we ended up making those criminals stakeholders in the peace process in the north. So of course, when the validity of those plates then was to an end, we foresaw that they would come up with barricades as well, and they will continue the same violence cycle. So this has been done. I think it could have been handled in a better way. Of course, the inflammatory narrative against our allies, especially against the state secretary, which Kurti called naive, some of the statements of Secretary Blinken, I think that was not mature, and that was not the right way to do it. We've had disagreements in the past as well, also with the US as well, but we did this via institutional dialogue. We discussed, we managed to narrow our differences and to come up with a common denominator, but we never went out in the public and calling names of our main allies. And imagine, Secretary Blinken was the one who wrote the speech of President Bill Clinton when NATO intervened in March 24th. So, the parallelism is totally out of
What about putting
context.
the mayors, the ethnic Albanian mayors, into the municipalities in the north? Do you think that situation could have been handled with a bit more care, a bit less force?
Listen, that was legitimate because the elections were done in a fair and democratic way. The international community accepted them, and they said they were done fairly, in a good manner, with European, with the democratic standards as well. But maybe the timing could have been coordinated better with the security institutions and with, of course, with the Quint and with US. So again, we come back to the coordination element, which Kosovo benefited from in the past and will benefit if it does so closely with our traditional allies. And Kurti has to learn to do this, and he has to believe that this will not minimize Kosovo's sovereignty, in contrary.
Now, my last question regarding relations with Albania that we have touched on a bit. So, in terms of relationships with Albania, politically over the last year, there's been a bit of back and forth between the two countries, maybe be described as a bit rocky. Do you think this comes from the Albanian side, maybe being a bit provocative, or the Kosovo side, maybe being a bit hard-headed? Or is it just two Balkan men who are very hard-headed, coming together? Do you think Edi Rama has been right in his approach? He's kind of tried to position himself as a mediator of sorts. What's your view on this? Or do you think it's all a show?
No, actually, it's not a show. Unfortunately, it's not a show. I would love it to be a show and to be so superficial that we call it, a show. Unfortunately, Prime Minister Rama had these issues, not just with this current Prime Minister of Kosovo. Whenever they don't agree, and it's always in terms of Serbia, the issue is Serbia. Whenever we don't agree with his stances, with his opinions regarding the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue or the solution, Prime Minister Rama tends to personalize the state-to-state relations, which, in contrary, personal opinions of a certain leader of Kosovo should not affect at all the state-to-state sister relations we have between Kosovo and Albania. And it should be like that, regardless of what certain individual temporary leaders think of. So we've had this issue, again, I must bring this up, when in 2018, 19, 20, when there was a border correction issue, and which Rama indirectly supported, and the Kosovo government at that time didn't, but the president did. So Edi Rama personalized his relation with the president while attacking the prime minister. And I think he's doing the same right now because of association. And I think the association of Serb municipalities, as Serbia pretends to build one in Kosovo, is a synonym of division of Kosovo. So it's the same aim, but with a different model. So that's why now we see Prime Minister Edi Rama being hard on Prime Minister Kurti, going on and going ahead with proposals without coordinating Kosovo at all, or without consulting Kosovo at all, or just discussing on what the opinion of the leaders of Kosovo is. So I think this is not the approach that should be. I know Prime Minister Rama has more experience maybe. He's more informed on issues of geopolitical context, but unfortunately we haven't seen this this knowledge manifesting in a useful way when it comes to Kosovo and Serbia dialogue. Edi Rama seems like he is trying to build ahead a future for his international career.
He told me he doesn't want one.
Maybe he doesn't, but his actions, tell that there is a slight ambition there. And maybe he is using this kind of, neutrality element to put himself forward as, credible leader. But unfortunately, he's losing the main element, which is the national element that he should be helping Kosovo right now, especially when the history and the past is very fresh and we haven't resolved it, even though it has passed 25 years, but we're still dealing with the same issues 25 years after the war. So let's hope that they will find a common ground, as he did with the president of Kosovo lately. So he will find a common ground with the Prime Minister of Kosovo, as well as the Prime Minister of Kosovo should be more flexible on discussing, opening up, consulting with the Albanian Prime Minister. But it has not been pleasant to see and witness the clashes, the disagreements.
You can imagine Serbia seeing it and going, haha, it should be a more united
it's
front.
no secret. We've seen Prime Minister Rama being very close to Vučić, especially in the time of the Open Balkans project, which has fortunately failed now. But we've seen them very close together, unfortunately.
I would hope that Albania would improve the ties with Kosovo more, especially at the moment
But
when
apart from this,
such precarious.
context, this relation, prime minister to prime minister, I think the president is doing a great job.
Yes.
The Albanian president, as well as the current foreign minister. I know they've been lobbying as well as discussing for Kosovo's recognition, as well as talking to other partners and members as well to advance Kosovo's subjectivity, which is very helpful.
Yes.
But I think given Albania's position in the world and in the international context, I think Kosovo could benefit a lot if there would be a genuine dialogue and a genuine coordination and cooperation on the priorities and on the strategic vision and on the issue of helping each other as Albanians to strengthen ourselves in the Western Balkan region for purposes of peace and stability and democracy.
That's a good note to end on. Meliza, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alice.
That's all for this week. Thank you for joining me on Inside Albania. You can watch the show every Saturday on Euronews Albania, on our YouTube channel, or across all major podcasting platforms. Mirapavshim.